The Minnesota Vikings officially have a better record than the 0-1 Baltimore Ravens. Here we go. Here we go, Minnesota Vikings fans, with a chance to be 1-0 on Sunday at New York. On this show, I'm going to preview the matchup on Sunday, and I'm going to tell you the biggest obstacle standing in the Minnesota Vikings' way. I'm going to share with you what will ultimately decide this football game on Sunday. So a couple of things to look at. One thing to consider is what the betting markets are saying. And basically, the betting markets, although this is a road game for the Minnesota Vikings, so something to consider. If this was a home game for the Minnesota Vikings, they'd be favored by even more points. But ESPN Bet has the Minnesota Vikings as a -1.5 favorite. And I was looking at the ESPN matchup predictor, and it has the Minnesota Vikings with a 49.9% chance to win. And it has the New York Giants at a 49.7% chance to win. So basically what they're telling you is that this game is a pick'em game. Both teams are coming into the season not expected to make the playoffs. The Giants have quarterback Daniel Jones coming off an injury last year. But even before the injury, he wasn't performing all that well with 2 touchdowns and 6 interceptions. They drafted their rookie wide receiver, Malik Neighbors, and there's a, very hopeful that he can perform well as New York Giants wide receiver 1 eventually. So those are some of the headlines entering this game. I believe DraftKings has the Minnesota Vikings as a 2-point favorite entering this game. But what really needs to be looked at is the matchup between the offensive and the defensive line, because this is going to dictate the outcome in this game. I was looking at a preview website. There's actually a Minnesota Vikings preview website. I'll share the screen with you. And this is going to dictate the outcome, because the Minnesota Vikings offensive line is pretty good. Their weakness, however, though, comes in their size. There's lots of times throughout the regular season where you see a big defensive line just barrel through the smaller offensive line that the Minnesota Vikings have. Garrett Bradbury, even though he was much improved last year, he's still an undersized center. Blake Brandel, we've never seen him as a starting left guard before. So what is he going to bring to the table? And we all know how good of a right guard Ed Ingram is. There's a lot of weakness on the interior offensive line for the Minnesota Vikings. You look at what the New York Giants have on their defensive line, and they got Dexter Lawrence, who is 6'4", 340 pounds, and they've built their entire defensive line around him. It looks like their front includes edge rushers Brian Burns, who joined the team this offseason as a former first-round pick by Carolina, and Kevin Thibodeau, who is also a very good defensive lineman. And it looks like they have former second-round picks Boogie Basham and Aziz Ojulari to provide extra strength on their defensive line. And I'm getting this from the Minnesota Vikings, Vikings.com preview with the Vikings.com preview. I don't know where I was going with that. But the Giants defensive line is also coached by former Vikings assistant Andre Patterson. So some ties here at the New York Giants defensive line. So this is going to be the difference between winning and losing the game for the Minnesota Vikings. If they can give Sam Darnold a clean pocket and allow Aaron Jones rushing lanes to make plays happen and to everyone says this. It's all about having third and manageable. It's like you could run through the whole list of NFL cliches. It's all about moving the chains on third downs. It's all about getting off the field on third downs. Like, I can tell you exactly what the reaction is going to be if the Minnesota Vikings win or lose this game. They didn't give themselves manageable third downs. The turnovers were too much. Blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. It's the exact same thing over and over again. But this game is ultimately going to come down to the Minnesota Vikings offensive line protecting Sam Darnold, giving him a clean pocket, because Sam Darnold has a bunch of fumbles throughout his NFL career. I think Alec Lewis pointed out that he had is that even possible? 38 fumbles in his NFL career. I got to find this, because if they do not clean up Sam Darnold, then this is going to be a terrible game for the Minnesota Vikings. Let's see here. 39 NFL QBs have thrown at least 1,000 passes in the last 5 years. Sam Darnold ranks last among them in passer rating and EPA per dropback. How much of this was a byproduct of his environment? Talk to people in New York and Carolina, and you'll hear stories that make you wonder how many QBs spent their first 5 NFL seasons in worse situations. Here we go. Darnold has also fumbled 38 times in 56 games. Are you kidding me?
You kidding me?
This is what's ultimately going to decide the game. The Minnesota Vikings offensive line needs to protect Darnold because he is susceptible to fumbling the ball a lot. I mean, this is more than one every other game. He's almost fumbling the ball every single game. This is crazy. So he fumbles a lot. He has lots of turnovers. And the New York Giants understand this, and they have a phenomenal defensive line. And the Minnesota Vikings interior offensive line is not the strongest. So that's what this game is going to boil down to. That's what's going to decide this game. You talk about Justin Jefferson and Aaron Jones and Sam Darnold and Jordan Addison, which it looks like he's playing, so that's a good thing for the Minnesota Vikings. Looks like Jalen Naylor is a little bit behind Jordan Addison in recent reports that I've been reading. But this game, make no mistake about it, is going to boil down to the Minnesota Vikings offensive line protecting Sam Darnold and giving rushing lanes to Aaron Jones. That's ultimately going to decide it. And there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. My prediction. I've been thinking about this for the last few days. And in Jacob's and I's favorable, formidable, and 50-50 podcast where we predicted every single game from the Minnesota Vikings, I shared that the Minnesota Vikings are going to lose this game. I don't think the offensive line is going to be able to hold up. Specifically, Ed Ingram, Bradbury, and Brandel. So I think the New York Giants are going to win this football game 21-17. Again, I've said this before, but the margin for error is so small, and there are so many close games in the NFL. Can you really trust Sam Darnold to win these small margin of error football games where he needs to play phenomenal? Can he go 4 full quarters consistently without turning the football over? I think this will be his best place he's ever played in his entire career, and he'll put up his best stat line that he's ever put up. But I just don't trust him for a full 4 quarters. I don't trust him in a close football game. At the end of the game, 2-minute drive, lead the team down the field, score a touchdown. I mean, there's only a handful of guys you do trust in that situation. You think about like Mahomes, you think about Josh Allen, but Lamar Jackson, as great as he is, do you really trust him in that situation? Do you really trust Aaron Rodgers in that situation? How many guys do you trust down the stretch of an NFL football game, 2 minutes left, and you need to score a touchdown? There's not that many. Just a few small select players. And is Sam Darnold one of them? I don't think so. Not even close. So that is my preview pod. Giants win 21-17, and the Minnesota Vikings fall to 0-1.